She's a supply clerk, not a gunsmith. Get her out of here, a master sergeant bellowed. But when she reassembled the jammed assault rifle in under 8 seconds, the entire armory fell silent, their eyes fixed on one thing. The air in the armory was thick with the scent of gun oil and stale sweat. A familiar perfume in this forgotten NATO outpost carved into the Carpathian Mountains. A young soldier, barely old enough to grow a proper beard, stood red-faced over a disassembled M4A1, its parts scattered on the workbench like a failed puzzle. The training schedule was frozen, and Master Sergeant Evans, a man with a bulldog's jaw and a voice like grinding gravel, was not pleased. "What's the hold up, Private?" Evans barked, his voice echoing off the concrete walls. "You break it, you fix it." The private fumbled with the bolt carrier group, his hands shaking. "It's jammed, Master Sergeant." "Really stuck." Evans spat on the floor. "Useless." His eyes scanned the room, landing on Ava Morgan, who was quietly cataloging ammunition crates in the corner. "Morgan, stop counting bullets and get back to your depot. This is a place for soldiers, not supply clerks." A few of the men snickered. Ava, a 30-year-old woman with sharp, intelligent eyes and brown hair, pulled back in a severe bun, didn't flinch. She simply placed her clipboard down and walked toward the bench. "I said get out," Evans repeated, stepping in her path. "I can fix it," she said, her voice calm and even, a stark contrast to the aggressive tension in the room. The soldier who had been struggling with a rifle scoffed. "With what? A requisition form?" Ava ignored them. She sidestepped Evans, her movements fluid and economical. Her hands, devoid of polish or jewelry, descended on the rifle parts. What followed was a display of near-hypnotic precision. There was no hesitation, no wasted motion. A crisp click, a smooth pull, a decisive reset. Her fingers danced through the intricate mechanics with a familiarity that was both unnerving and mesmerizing. 8 seconds. The rifle was whole again, its action cleared. She racked the charging handle, producing a clean, authoritative clack, and placed the weapon back on the bench. The armory, once buzzing with hushed mockery, fell into a profound silence. The men stared, their smirks wiped clean from their faces. Evans's jaw hung slightly ajar. As Ava turned to walk away, a lieutenant standing near the wall froze. His eyes, sharper than the others, had caught a glimpse of something as her jacket shifted. Underneath the collar, worn and faded, was the corner of a patch. A black, coiling tentacle, the emblem of the Kraken. The lieutenant's face went pale, a flicker of disbelief, and something akin to fear in his eyes. He said nothing, but he knew. That patch wasn't supposed to exist anymore. The 8-second fix became a low-rumbling myth in the barracks. It was a piece of grit in the well-oiled machine of base hierarchy, an anomaly that didn't fit the narrative of Ava Morgan, the quiet logistics tech. She kept her head down, her routine unchanged. She ate alone, her posture perfect, her gaze never lingering. But the whispers followed her like a shadow. A few days later, she was assigned to sort a shipment of defective ACOG scopes in a dusty back room of the armory. A group of soldiers, led by a cocky Corporal Miller, lounged nearby. Miller, who wore his arrogance like a second skin and had a fresh, garish tattoo creeping up his neck, decided to make her his afternoon's entertainment. "Look at her," Miller sneered, his voice loud enough to carry. "Playing with the big girl toys. Thinks she's in a sandbox." His buddies chuckled, one of them mimicking Ava's careful, deliberate movements with clumsy exaggeration. Ava didn't look up. She picked up a scope, held it to the light, and with a practiced eye, tested its alignment. She placed it on the functional pile. Miller leaned closer, his voice dripping with condescension. "But she thinks she's fixing a satellite with that thing. Hey, Morgan, you even know which end to look through?" Ava paused, her fingers hovering over the next scope. She finally lifted her gaze and met his. It was a brief, unnerving moment of contact. "This one," she said, her voice devoid of emotion, "is miscalibrated by 3 milliradians to the left. At 100 meters, you'd miss the target by half a meter." She placed the scope on the defective pile and immediately went back to work. The laughter died. Miller's smirk faltered, replaced by a confused scowl. The technical precision of her statement was a slap in the face he hadn't expected. He and his friends exchanged uneasy glances before shuffling away, their bravado punctured. But Master Sergeant Evans couldn't let go. He saw her quiet competence not as an asset, but as a challenge to his authority. He cornered her outside the armory later that day, his bulky frame blocking the exit. "You think you're clever, Morgan," he growled. "Fixing one rifle doesn't make you a warrior. It makes you a liability. You're a clerk. Know your place. One more stunt like that, and I'll have you on a plane back to Central Supply, stacking boxes until you retire." Ava stopped. She didn't turn immediately, letting the threat hang in the cold air. When she finally faced him, her eyes were steady, almost unervingly calm. "My job is to ensure equipment is functional, Master Sergeant," she said. "I'm solving problems. Isn't that what we're all supposed to be doing?" Evans was left speechless, his face turning a shade of purple. He just grunted and stormed off, leaving a few watching soldiers to whisper among themselves. 8 seconds, man," one said to the other. "Who the hell is she?" The tension simmering beneath the surface finally boiled over at the firing range. A new line of designated marksman rifles was being tested, and Ava, following protocol, had put her name on the list to familiarize herself with the system she would be logging. The officer in charge was Captain Hayes, a man whose slicked back hair and condescending tone screamed of privilege and a career spent far from any real danger. He scanned the list, and his lip curled when he saw her name. "Morgan," he called out, his voice dripping with disdain. "Logistics. What are you doing here? This isn't for you." He waved a dismissive hand. "You're cut. We need soldiers who can actually use these, not clerks who might scratch the finish." The group of soldiers waiting for their turn laughed. Corporal Miller, ever the opportunist, pulled out his phone and snapped a picture of Ava standing near the weapon rack. He quickly typed a caption, showing it to his friends. "Logistic Barbie's first time holding a real gun. Be gentle, boys." The laughter grew louder, crueler. Ava's face remained a mask of neutrality. She didn't argue or show a flicker of emotion. She simply gave a curt nod and walked away, her movements deliberate and controlled. That afternoon, a thick, disorienting fog rolled in from the mountains, swallowing the range whole. A planned simulation devolved into chaos. Visibility was near zero. The advanced targeting systems were useless. It all came down to instinct. Shots went wide, frustrations mounted. During the drill, one of the new rifles misfired. As the designated armorer struggled, Ava stepped forward from the sidelines where she'd been observing. "I've got it," she said quietly. Hayes, already irritated, snorted. "Get back, Morgan. You'll just make it worse." She ignored him. In the dense fog, she didn't use her eyes. She picked up the rifle, her hands moving by feel alone, her body a living extension of the weapon. She adjusted the scope with a series of minute tactile clicks, her breathing steadying as she shouldered the rifle. It was a method no one there had ever seen. She wasn't aiming. She was indexing, her body becoming the firing platform. She fired 5 shots into the white abyss. On the monitor in the control booth, 5 green lights blinked to life. 5 shots, all dead center on targets no one could even see. Hayes' jaw dropped. He stared at the screen, then at Ava, his arrogance momentarily shattered. "Only Kraken or Viper units teach that kind of instinct shooting," he muttered, more to himself than anyone else. As Ava handed the rifle back, a gust of wind whipped her jacket open. This time, it wasn't just a glimpse. The entire patch on her shoulder was visible for a clear, undeniable second. A black, menacing Kraken, its tentacles writhing, the symbol of a ghost unit. The soldiers nearby who saw it went utterly still. A young private took an involuntary step back, as if he'd seen something supernatural. The incident cemented her reputation, but not in a good way. Later, in the women's locker room, as Ava changed, her shirt lifted, revealing a long, jagged scar that snaked across her ribs. A sharp-tongued Sergeant Diaz, known for her cruel gossip, laughed loudly. "What's that, Morgan? Fall down a flight of stairs, trying to carry a box?" The other women joined in. Probably drew it on with a marker, one sneered. Wants everyone to think she's some kind of operator. The rumor spread like a virus. Ava Morgan was a fake, a fraud, a liar desperate for unearned glory. The combination of the impossible shots in the fog and the swirling rumors of her being a fraud forced the hand of the base command. The whispers had become a discipline problem. An officer with a clipboard and a sour expression summoned Ava to his office the next morning. "Morgan," he said, avoiding her eyes as he read from a form. "Due to recent events and questions regarding your service record, you are being temporarily suspended from all technical duties, pending a full identity and background verification." He finally looked up, his gaze cold. "If you falsified any part of your record, you're done here. Understand?" Ava simply nodded, her face impassive. She didn't argue, didn't defend herself. She turned and left the office, her silence more unsettling to the officer than any outburst would have been. The task of digging into her file fell to a nervous tech officer who was always trying to overcompensate for his lack of field experience. He sat at his terminal, flanked by the sour-faced officer and a lieutenant colonel who was overseeing the process. The tech typed in Ava's service number, expecting a standard, unremarkable personnel file to appear. Instead, the screen flashed a violent, pulsing red. A large dialog box filled the monitor. Security error. File access denied. Classified level, black. By order of Joint Command. The tech officer froze, his fingers hovering over the keyboard. He let out a small, choked sound. The lieutenant colonel leaned in, his face paling as he read the words. "My God," he whispered, his voice barely audible. "I've been in for 20 years. I've never seen a clearance that high. Never." The air in the room grew thick and heavy. A call was made. 20 minutes later, an intelligence advisor arrived, a severe-looking woman with her hair in a tight bun and eyes that missed nothing. She looked at the screen, then glanced over at Ava, who was standing quietly in the corner of the room, waiting as instructed. The advisor's expression didn't change, but a flicker of understanding passed through her eyes. Without a word, she turned and left the room. The tech officer let out a shaky, nervous laugh. Only Kraken operatives get that kind of encryption, he stammered to no one in particular. "I thought they were a myth." The news of the level black classification spread faster than the rumors had. The atmosphere on the base shifted overnight. Fear replaced mockery. Corporal Miller, upon seeing Ava cross the training yard, would suddenly find his boots intensely fascinating, staring at his laces until she passed. The swagger and laughter that once followed her were replaced by a wide, respectful berth and averted eyes. They didn't understand what she was, but they now knew she was something to be feared. The fear, however, didn't quell all suspicion. For some, it only deepened it. During a base-wide briefing, a senior advisor, a self-important man named Caldwell who polished his medals more than he read his reports, decided to make a public spectacle. He saw the whispers about Ava as an opportunity to assert his own authority. He stood up, his voice booming through the auditorium. "We speak of integrity and honor, yet we have mysteries walking our own halls." He gestured vaguely in Ava's direction. "If this soldier is as distinguished as the rumors claim, why isn't her name on any list of merit? Let's take Operation Blackout, for example." He pulled up the mission records on the main screen. It was a legendary, disastrous mission everyone knew of. A list of decorated survivors scrolled by. Ava's name was nowhere to be seen. "No one hides their honors. Not forever," Caldwell declared, leaning forward, his eyes narrowing on Ava. "Unless there's something to hide. Perhaps a dishonorable past you're trying to erase with these stories." The room was electric with tension. Every eye was on Ava, waiting for her to break, to defend herself, to finally crack under the pressure. She just sat there, her hands folded calmly in her lap, her expression unreadable. She didn't have to. At that precise moment, the deafening chop of helicopter blades tore through the morning calm. A Black Hawk helicopter, sleek and menacing, landed on the parade ground outside. The doors slid open, and General Maxwell, the 4-star head of NATO's Allied Training Command, stepped out. He was a man built of granite and resolve, and he strode into the briefing room with an aura of absolute command. He ignored the saluting officers, ignored Caldwell, who stood frozen mid-speech, and walked directly to Ava. He stopped before her, his posture rigid, and executed a salute so sharp and perfect it seemed to cut the air. "Commander Morgan," he said, his voice quiet but carrying with immense weight. "I must admit, I didn't expect to see your retraining application come through this channel." Ava stood, but did not salute back. It was a sign of a different kind of protocol, one no one else understood. "I needed to reevaluate my capabilities, General," she stated simply. "It's been 3 years off the trigger." The words hit the room like a physical force. "Commander." The title hung in the air, shattering every assumption. Caldwell looked as if he'd been struck. General Maxwell gave Ava a slight, knowing nod. Then he turned, not to the stunned advisor, but to the central console. He inserted a black, unmarked USB stick. "Perhaps some context is required," he said dryly. A video flickered to life on the main screen. It was grainy, chaotic helmet cam footage. A rocky, desolate valley. Smoke, explosions, the sounds of a firefight. The images were brutal and unfiltered. The narration was a flat, military monotone. Kraken unit ambushed. All members down or Kia. Except one. The camera perspective shifted. It was Ava. Her face streaked with blood and grime. Her eyes burning with a terrifying intensity. She was dragging a wounded, unconscious comrade, a man twice her size, across the exposed valley floor. Sole survivor, codename Kraken Ghost, single-handedly neutralized 3 enemy positions while evacuating her teammate over 3 kilometers under active fire, the narrator continued. Post-mission, Commander Morgan declined all citations, including the Medal of Honor, and voluntarily withdrew from active special operations. The screen went black. The silence in the room was absolute, profound. Ava stood up, the scrape of her chair the only sound. She turned and walked towards the exit. Then one soldier stood up, then another, and another. In a wave of silent, unified motion, every single soldier in that room, from the lowest private to the highest-ranking officer, rose to their feet. They raised their hands in salute, not to the screen, not to the general, but to the back of the woman walking away. It was their apology, their penance, their ultimate show of respect. The fallout was swift and silent. There were no public reprimands, just a quiet, efficient house cleaning. Master Sergeant Evans received transfer orders to a remote weather station in the Aleutian Islands. Corporal Miller's social media accounts vanished after the helmet cam footage was anonymously leaked online and went viral, his digital life incinerated by a firestorm of public outrage. Captain Hayes lost his lucrative sponsorship from a major weapons manufacturer. His name quietly dropped from their list of brand ambassadors. And Sergeant Diaz, the woman who had mocked Ava's scar, was seen packing her bags a week later, her transfer papers marked with an undeniable urgency. They left without a word, their careers irrevocably altered by the quiet woman they had tried to break. Ava never acknowledged their departure. She simply continued her work. One evening, she was in the barracks, polishing a small, wickedly sharp combat knife no one had ever seen before. An old, grizzled master gunnery sergeant, a man whose face was a roadmap of past conflicts, sat on the bunk opposite her. He'd been quiet through the whole affair, watching. "You carried him 3 clicks," he said. It wasn't a question. Ava's hand stilled, the polished steel of the knife catching the dim light. She looked up, and for the first time, the hard shield in her eyes softened, replaced by a flicker of shared understanding. "He was my friend," she said. Her voice was barely a whisper, but it held the weight of the world. The old soldier just nodded slowly, stood up, and left her in peace. The other soldiers in the room, all pretending to be busy with their own tasks, had heard every word. The air felt different, charged with a truth too large for the small space. On her final day, as she packed her small bag of tools, a young female private approached her, the same one who had stepped back in fear at the sight of the Kraken patch. Her eyes were nervous, but filled with a new, fierce determination. I want to be like you," the private stammered. Ava zipped her bag and slung it over her shoulder. She looked the young woman square in the eye. "Don't," she said, her tone not harsh, but heavy with meaning. "Be better." She walked out of the base and into the morning fog, disappearing as quietly as she had arrived. Her story, however, remained. It became a legend, the tale of the Kraken ghost, told in hushed tones in armories and mess halls across the globe. It wasn't a story about revenge. It was a story about truth and the quiet, unyielding strength of a woman who didn't need to raise her voice to be heard, and whose silence was louder than any army's roar. For everyone who's ever been underestimated, judged, or pushed aside, Ava's story became their own. What battles are you fighting in silence? Share your story of quiet strength in the comments below, and let's honor each other's journey. Comment with respect. And if Ava's resilience moved you, subscribe and join us for more stories of the unbreakable human spirit.